Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf Samach Gimel. We begin on the bottom of Samach Beis, Amud Beis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues the discussion from the previous Daf regarding this topic of this Perik that we opened up on Daf Samach Beis, Amud Beis, Perik Ho'imer, discussing regarding the halacha of shlichus, of a shlich le'halacha and a shlich le'kabbalah, and our Gemara is going to continue regarding this halacha of halech, of saying, hey, this is for you, do what you're supposed to do. And the question then comes up, what happens if he actually changes what was actually the designation of a shlichus? What's the halacha going to be when the man tells him, okay, do like you were supposed to do? Shiur is sponsored by Kalzich and Chesko. Turn to Daf Yomi. I'm joining today's Daf. Something to discuss in today's Daf are this specific case that we're going to start with is Haylech Kameisha Amra. What happens if the shliach actually changed what the wife told him? He was supposed to be shlich l'kabbalah. He comes to the husband and says, hey, your wife sent me. And he says, do like she said. But the question is, is he relying on what she had said? She said one thing. And he ended up changing what she had said. And he's like, okay, do what she had said. Is he relying on what she said? Or is he relying on what he said? And therefore, it's going to be a huge ramification about okay, so what is he actually going to be? Because the husband is the one who authorizes, and he's not doing what the wife had asked him to do. But is the husband authenticating what he's saying she said, or is what she actually said when he says Haylech Kamei Shama? And there's several ways of interpreting the shlichus, because essentially, if let's say she had made him into a one type of shliach, and he changes it, shlich le'halacha lahavina. Let's say in the one way, if she says bring me my get, and he's like, oh, your wife made me shlich l'kabbalah, well then essentially he's trying to say, well, I don't want to go schlep all the way to wherever she lives way out in the boondocks and go and bring it to her. I want to be shlich l'kabbalah. So then it's essentially maybe saying I'm not a shliach at all. And again, we get into the discussion that we mentioned in the previous stuff regarding Haylech Kazachi. When he says Haylech, here, bring this to my wife, is that saying that I want you to be zaycha for her? So if she wants him to be a shlich l'kabbalah, would his words Haylech be saying, no, I want you to bring it to her, or would that allow him to be zaychet for her before he even gets to her hand? Also, we discussed the case regarding shlich l'kabbalah meshlich bala. If it's valid for her to make a shlich l'kabbalah, to receive it from his shlich l'halacha, and we'll see exactly why would that be problematic. And one of the themes that come up with that is lechazah shlichus etz labal, which is if a person could be both the shlich l'halacha of the husband and shlich l'kabbalah of the wife, well, that would be problematic because it's halacha that the shlichus has to be able to go back to tell the one who sent him to say, hey, I did your job. If that person is transferring now to be a shlich l'kabbalah, then you're not able to go back and say, I did what you asked me, because now the person is busy doing a different type of shlichus. And also, in shlichus in the chazaka that we presume when the shliach does something that they did, so in the sense of that this is what they were supposed to do, we presume that it was done. So we begin the current Daf Samach Beis and Beis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Amud, that the Gemara had earlier explained there's two types of shlichus. There's a shlich l'halacha appointed by the husband, and there's a shlich l'kabbalah appointed by the wife. And we said that there's a fundamental difference between the two of them. By a shlich l'halacha, imrotz alachzu yachzer. If the husband wants to back out, he can back out. Why? Because the woman's not considered divorced until it actually gets to her hand. So if he's sending the shliach on a 20-day journey and he intercepts him in the middle, he could back out. But by shlich l'kabbalah, imrotz alachzu lo yachzer. We said why? Because the shlich is considered the yad of the woman. It's like the woman that was divorced the moment it came to the shliach's hand. Now the Gemara discuss a case where the shlich misrepresented his appointment, and therefore it's going to be critical how to understand what is it that the husband's telling him. Itmar says the Gemara as follows: the woman that says to her shliach, it's a little bit complex, these dafim, havili giti. She says, bring for me my get. Okay, so that's a shliach lahaylacha. She's saying, bring for me my get, not to be makabel, bring for me. Now, he tells the husband, the ishtacha amra, he changes what she said. He says, your wife said, hiskabeli giti, receive for me my get. That's critical because a shlich l'kabbalah, it's over the second he gets it. Shliach lahaylacha, which is she say, bring for me, it has to get to her. Now, the husband, Amar, he says like this, look, you know what? Haylech kama sha'amra. Here, it's for you the way she said. Okay? Some of Nachman Amarav Baravu Amarav. He says, Afili he get liyada. He says, even if the get reaches her hands, Eina megareshes, she's not going to be divorced as the Gemara continues to explain. Why? Shema Mino, we can infer from this that when someone tells the shliach, "Hey, look, do what the one who sent you asked you to do," adibura dideko samach is relying on his words, on the words of the shliach is what he's telling him. Hey, look, do like what she said. That, in other words, that I believe you that you said that she made you into a shliach like Kabbalah. Oh, that's why Reb Nachman is telling you that she's not going to be divorced. Why? Because when the husband gave this shliach, the get, was with the intention of that he's a shliach like Kabbalah. Not with the intention of being a shliach le'alacha, because he believed him, adibur didei, on his words. Now, he's not a shliach like Kabbalah. And the husband neither can make a shliach like Kabbalah either. So therefore, this should resolve the question that's asked in Bab Matzia and Perek Kasei, that we question, do we rely on the words of the shliach? Seemingly from Rab Nachman's halacha, we see that he relies on the shliach, and therefore she's not going to get divorced even when it comes to her hands. Because if you think we rely on her words, and that's what he's telling him, he says, look, I don't know. But it's like what she said. That's what I'm giving it to you for. But then at least when the get comes to her hand, she should be divorced, because the husband also made her shlich le'alacha the way the woman asked for it to be brought to her. So why would Rav Nachman say she wouldn't be divorced even when it comes to her hands? Obviously because adibura didei, he's relying the words of the shliach. Shliach says I'm a shliach l'Kabbalah. He says, okay, here, breathe the shliach l'Kabbalah. But he's not a shliach l'Kabbalah. So there was no shlichus, not from the husband, not from the wife, and therefore she's not divorced. No, because she's saying basically to say, I don't want you to be my shliach l'Kabbalah. So the shliach is basically going to the husband saying, here, make me a shliach le'alacha. Or because she could send someone like a UPS driver to go pick up the package. It's not going to be shliach l'Kabbalah. Shliach l'Kabbalah has to be a mitam yad, like it has to be. No, that's what I'm saying. It's not. She just wants someone to pick it up. No, it has to be given to her. It has to be given to her. V'nosan b'yada. Right.
When she will receive it, that will
Right.
be her receiving.
That's
why would that not be good?
because he wasn't a shliach le'alacha. No one made him a shliach. What?
No,
No, there has to be a shliach.
So not that he didn't give the get, then she's gracious. When she receives the gift.
From who? Who's she receiving it from?
Let's make a difference.
No, it has to be given. It has to be given to her. But nosan b'yada. It has to be given to her. Yeah, you can't just pick it up from a table. Yeah. Right. 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 That's where we had the case of when it's put in the chutzah and then she acquires that chutzah. It's not going to work. So Al Kapanim says the Gemara, you prove from Rav Nachman's halacha that we rely on his words. So on that in Rav Ashi, again, it's a complex stuff. He says, no, Achi could you be? The case is, it's not true that you could prove from here a dibur didei samach. Why? Because Bishloim it my ipcha. I could understand if you would say an opposite case. What's this opposite case? She says, Hiskabel li giti. She says, I want you to receive from me my get. Meaning, she says to him, I want you to be a shlich l'Kabbalah. Now, the shlich actually says to the husband, V'ishtecha, you know what your wife said? Haveli giti. She said, bring for me my get. So that would make him have to go through the effort to bring it to her. So this is the inverse of the other case that we just said. V'omar, and the husband says, look, timateva, I don't know what she said. Hey, do like she said. And he would have said the following halacha, when the get reaches to her hand, she's divorced. If that would have been the halacha that he had said, then you would be able to prove Alma that we see a dibura didahu good the kasamach. They're relying on her words, meaning that the husband does not believe the shliach. He says that whatever it is that she had said, and therefore he's giving it to her, the shliach, like the woman had said, which was she actually did say his kabbalah gidi. She said, make me shliach kabbalah, and then she would be divorced the moment it reaches to the hand of the shliach. Or inami. Had Rav Nachman said in the case that we just described, that when the get reaches liyada to her hand, she would be divorced, then you could prove a dibura didei kasamach. You would be able to prove the other way. They rely on his words, and that is, he's believing the shliach that what she said was what the shliach said, which is that he's giving it to him as a shliach lahilacha, and therefore she would only be divorced when it comes to her hand. says the Gemara, yes, if you said this case, and you said either way, when it gets to her or gets to his hand, then you could prove either adibura didei kasamach, adibura dida kasamach. But Allah, in the case that Rav Nachman was talking about, that he says she's not going to be divorced even when it comes to her hand, you cannot prove that the reason is because he's relying on the words of the shliach. Because even if he relied on the words of what the woman really had said, and that he's making him into shliach le'alacha, still Rav Nachman would be correct to say that the shliach himself, it's not for that he accepted it, because what happened is, because mishum de akre shliach lishlichus legamrihu, he doesn't want to go through the effort of bringing it all the way to her, and he's uprooting his shlichus because he's essentially saying, shlich lekabbalah havina, I'm willing to be a shlich that's going to accept it, and that's it. Lo ilacha havina, I don't want to have to bring it all the way to her. So therefore, it says Rashi, even if he changes his mind and he ends up bringing it to her hand, it's not a get, because originally he was not accepting to be a shliach from the husband to do la ilacha. He's not a shliach. So that's why it's not going to work. So it's no raya. If you had this other case, it would be a raya. The case that you're describing is not a raya, because I can tell you different reasons, fundamentally because he's not a shliach at all. So Amar Rav Huna, he says, okay, Tashma, let's try to bring a raya, not like Rav Nachman. Let's refute his halacha. Because the Mishnah said, if someone says, his kabel get zele ishti. We said in our Mishnah, if someone says, receive this get from my wife, this is how we opened up the parak on the previous Daf, or take this, transport this get to my wife. So he said, Ratzalach ziyas. But once the back out, he can back out again, because shliach leilach. Says the Gemara, time the Ratza. Sounds like, if he wants to back out, he can back out. Haloi Ratza. But let's say he doesn't want to, and the get comes to her hand. Have a get, it's going to be a get. Wait a second. Mamai, how do you understand this halacha? Habala bar shabi shlich likabalahu. The husband cannot make a shlich likabala, and he said his gabel gets a ishti. How could he give it to Matarius of Kabbalah? Ella, rather obviously, because Amina, we say that even though he didn't give it to him, but in the medium of shlich likabala, once it gets to her hand, she's going to be divorced. Why? Because Kivin Shanasan ain't a bligarsha. Since Lamaisi was looking to divorce her, he knows that he cannot make a shlich likabala. He wants him to really be a shlich leilacha. So Meima Amr, he tells himself, let her be divorced however she has to be divorced. Meaning, even though he knows it's not really going to work. So therefore, it says the Gemara Hachol over here by the teaching of Nachman, Nami also, even though that moment he didn't make him a shlich le'halacha, however, since ultimately he's looking to divorce him, to divorce her, so when he's giving it to the shliach, so the husband wants, he says to himself, let her be divorced however she has to be divorced, and therefore she should be a shlich le'halacha. In other words, the Gemara is asking on Rav Nachman's halacha, saying that, what are you saying, that he didn't make him a shliach, or whichever, according to whichever interpretation, a dibura didei kasamach, whatever it is. But why are you saying that even when he gets to our hands, she's not going to be divorced? How could it be any worse than the case of our Mishnah? Our Mishnah, he made him a shlich likabala. You can't make a shlich likabala. So we say, yeah, okay, it doesn't really mean he knows it's not going to be like, well, whatever, let her be divorced, whatever it takes. Say, so why is it any different? Let her be divorced, whatever it takes, even though he's not really making him the appropriate shlich that he's supposed to be. Says the Gemara, no, can you bear the cases? Hasim in our Mishnah. Everyone knows you can't make a shlich likabala. How could you make it? Adam, you can't make a shlich likabala. You're not the woman. You can't make someone to do receivable. So he's conclusively doing it for the purpose of making shlich leilacha. He said the word iskabel. Says Rashi, no, he means iskabel v'haylach. He means accepted and transported. And it's not like the reason that we said that it's going to be it's going to be a shlichus. But hachatai over here, in the case of Reb Nachman, the husband made a mistake. He thought that she made him a shlich lekabbalah because he changed the words of what the woman said. So he's relying on his words, and he's only giving it for the purposes of a shlich lekabbalah, and therefore she's not going to be divorced. Which Rashi just points out, even according to Rav Ashi, that explains the reasoning of Rav Nachman that from the beginning he was oiker that he was not a shliach. So that's also going to make sense what the Gemara is answering, because the reason the Mishnah is because when he says his kabbalah b'haylach kam, it means to really transport it. And from the beginning he was made a shliach. And the Gemara only needed to say that a hachatai was really only according to the first version, that we thought the reasoning of Rav was because adibur didei kazamach, we're saying, okay, well that was a mistake. you're relying on him, she really said something else. According to Rav Ashi's interpretation, you wouldn't have to say hachatai again, but that wouldn't be any difficulty in Rav Nachman from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah, he knows. Here, he doesn't know. However, Amar Rava says, Tashma Tzberan, I tried to bring another raya regarding this halacha of Nachman from the Mishnah of Samachei Amad Aleph. Mishnah says, Ketana Sha'amra, if a young girl says, she was a 10-year-old girl that's married, she said to her shliach, Hiskabali Giti, here, go ahead, receive my get for me. Ain't a get, it's not going to be a get. Actually, you get liyad until the get reaches to her hand. The reason for that is very simply because a child cannot make a shliach, as the Gemara says later on, Daf Samachei Amad Aleph. So therefore, it's not her shliach, rather it's going to be the husband's shliach. And as we know, by the husband's shliach, it only becomes a get once it reaches to her hand. Now, but one thing says the Gemara, okay, but kimat git liyad megash, when it reaches her hand, she is going to be divorced. Why? The husband, no one made him into a shliach l'halacha. She was a shliach l'kabbalah from the husband that she was making to receive from the husband. Ella, rather, what do we say? Once the husband is putting the eyes to divorce her, same type of question we asked from our Mishnah. They gotta say whatever it takes to get a divorce, because she's shliach l'kabbalah, and the girl can't make her shliach l'kabbalah. We say, okay, well, when they get her hands in divorce. So in the Rav Nachman's halacha, once he was wanting to divorce her, he's telling himself, however it takes to get divorced. So who cares that she made him really into a shliach halacha? And the shliach was changing his mind. He says, he told the husband, she made him shliach kabbalah. And he says, why does Nachman say it's not going to be a get? I don't care if you say because he's not really making a shliach. Who cares? The husband wants the heart to be divorced, or whatever it takes. So the Gemara, could you be the cases? Same type of answer the Gemara said before. There, in the case of the Mishnah later on, Daf Samachei, a person knows that a child, a young girl of 10, cannot make a shliach, and this is not a shliach l'kabbalah. So when the husband was giving the shliach from his 10-year-old wife, he was giving him to be a shliach l'halacha because he knows. But over here he's making a mistake. Again, like according to the first version, that that's what she said. Okay, give it like what she said, but that's not really what she said, and therefore that's why it's not going to work even when it comes to her hands. But the Gemara says Tashma Tzberan tries to bring another right, not like Rav Nachman, from the following brisa. The brisa says, if the woman says to the shliach, Havili Giti, bring me my get. Again, not mekabel, bring me my get. Then he tells to the husband, V'ishtacha amro, your wife said, Hiskabeli Giti, receive from me my get. That's one case. Or a different case. She tells him, Hiskabeli Giti, hey, receive from me my get. And he tells the husband, no, the other way around. V'ishtacha amro, your wife said, Havili Giti, bring me my get. Okay, either one of these cases, which are opposite cases, V'hu Amar, and the husband says, any one of these following verbiage, any one of the following phrases. He says either hoilich v'tein, okay, you know what? Bring it and give it to her. Or zechila, merit for her. Or viskabala, receive for her. Regarding any one of these cases, the halacha says the brayse is ratzalach zayachsa. If he wants to back out, he can back out. Now the Gemara is going to explain, again I said it's a complex stuff in Cheshbon, the Gemara is going to explain what this case is. But says the brayse for her, the Mishagiyah get the other one, once the get reaches her hand, the Meguresha, then she's divorced. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't it telling me that the case of Kabbalah is a Kabbalah, is going on the case of, meaning when the husband says receive, is going when the shlich said, I was a shlich like Kabbalah. V'halacha, and the case of halacha is going halacha, like Rashi explains. Meaning, the case that the husband had said to the shliach, okay, zachi v'hiskabel, go merit and receive it for her. That's going on the case when the shliach tells him, your wife said, hiskabel. And the case of ha'ilech v'tenla, that says the Mishnah, is going on when the woman said, havili. So he was saying essentially the same thing the shliach said the wife had said. And what do we say by both of these cases? Once the get reaches her hand, she's going to be divorced. Ooh, that refutes Rav Nachman from the case of Kabbalah Akabbalah, because we learned that when she says havili giti, what did he say? He said, your wife said hiskabel. And what's he saying back? Okay, hiskabel. Where explicitly he was giving it to the shliach in the medium of Kabbalah, of receiving. Now, the truth is, a husband cannot make a shliach like Kabbalah. And the thing is, she also didn't make a shliach like Kabbalah. And yet we're learning that the shliach is going to be a shliach lehoy lacha. because we said that the moment the gets to her hand, she's going to be divorced. Why? Must be because of the theory of Kivish Nasavin Lagarsha, once he divorces, whatever it takes, like we said before. If that's the case, all the more so, where when he tells him, look, he doesn't say explicitly, he just says, give it like she said, which is Rav Nachman's case, where you could say that he's not really relying on the words of the shliach, he's just making dependent on what she had said, and she had also made him a shliach leilacha, for sure she should be divorced, not like Rav Nachman. So it's a complex case, but basically from one of the cases you see that if there it's going to be a get when it's a Gili Yada, where he explicitly said, be makabel, which he cannot do Kabbalah, and the shliach said, I am a shliach Kabbalah, really the wife says shliach leilacha, so how is that working over there? And for sure, if Nachman's case should work then, says Gemara, loy, no. Again, it's a halt cup. Says Gemara, no, Kabbalah that we said. When he says to the shliach zochila v'skabbalah, that's actually going in the case of a haylacha. When the shliach tells the husband, your wife said, haveli, bring it to me. Now, the truth is, she had made, because if you remember the case of the Brisa, he inverted whatever she said. She had said, I want you to be a shliach li Kabbalah, because she said hiskabel. And on that case is what he's saying, that I want you to be a shliach li Kabbalah. So the Gemara is going to ask later on, if that's the case, so that both the husband and the wife are making him a shliach li Kabbalah, so then why could he back out until it gets to the hands of the woman? She should be divorced the moment it gets to the hand of the shliach. They both said hiskabel. But be that as it may, the next case is v'halacha, when he says to the shliach, Hoylech v'tein, it's going a Kabbalah. When the shliach said, your wife said hiskabel, but really she said haveli. So he was saying the same thing she said, not what he said. So therefore, that's why it's going to work. So that's the Gemara's answer. So it's nothing to do with Rav Nachman's type of a case. It's not doing against what she said. It's actually what she said, because Kabbalah is in halacha and halacha is in Kabbalah, not Kabbalah and halacha. So he's actually saying not what the shliach said, he's saying what the wife said, and therefore it's going to work. But the Gemara says, wait a second, I have a question. If when the husband says, okay, be makabel for her, like not like what you're saying, it's going a halacha. When he says your wife wanted me to bring it to her, but the question is, the mechimata gita liyada, the moment the get gets to the hand of the shliach, then la'al talav gita. Immediately it should be a get and she should be divorced, because both the husband and the wife, not what the shliach said, are both saying he should be a shliach li Kabbalah. So why is it that if the husband wants to back out until he gets to her hand, he can back out? Oh, says the Gemara, Shamim, now we should infer from this that the bure didei, that on the words of the shliach, kasamich is what he's relying. In other words, we should resolve from the fact that we're saying he can back out. Obviously, the husband is relying on the shliach's words. Why? Because what did the shliach say to the husband? The woman had said his kabel. The shliach said, no, ishtacha amra haveli, your wife actually said, bring it to me. Now, obviously, the husband's believing him. The husband said his kabel, which is the same as the woman, which is what the Gemara is questioning. She should be divorced the moment it gets to the shliach, sense it shouldn't have to wait, and he shouldn't be able to back out. No, he means his kabel v'hoylech, as we had explained before. His kabel doesn't mean like in the case of our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, how does this kabel work? It means, accept it and bring it to her. Because if you would say the teaching of Rav Nachman the opposite way, which is the case of, let's say, she says his kabel giti, and then the shliach says that your wife said, bring it to me, and he says Hilach Kamosha Amra, and Rav Nachman would say that when the get reaches to our hand, she can be divorced. So then we would prove from this that we're relying on the words of the shliach. So therefore, the Gemara is saying l'chayra, from this halacha we should prove that the bura didei samach, which is what we had said from the first version of Rav Nachman, that we see at the bura didei samach. So the Gemara says, no, hachi ashri, can you compare the cases? No, not necessarily the case. Hasam over there that we had said before, that if we would say the case of Nachman the opposite way, like we're saying over here, that if she says, to receive him my get, and the shliach says, your wife said, bring me my get, and the husband says, okay, look, whatever it is that she said, do. And Rav Nachman would have said that when the get reaches her hand, she would be divorced. Then we would be able to prove from that we're relying on his words, on the shliach's words. Why? Because ka'amalei heilach kamashamra. What does he say to the shliach? Do like she said. Now, since she's not divorced when the shliach receives it, you could prove the question we ask in Haseicher, in Perek Haseicher, that we had asked in such a situation when the husband says, Kamasha Amra, what does that mean? He's telling him that you're believed to me that that's what she said, and therefore I'm going to make you into a Shlich Leilocha the way you're saying. But Hach over here, that he's telling him, Zachi v'hiskabel, Mika Amale, is he telling him, Helach Kamasha Amra? Is he saying that do as she said? That you want to answer the question that we asked in Perek HaSeicher from that? No, because this that we're saying over here that he can back out is because since he's telling the Shliach, since the Shliach told to him that she made me a Shlich Leilocha, your wife, and he's saying his kabel, a person knows that he cannot make a Shlich Lekabbalah, must be, it means his kabel v'hoilech, yeah, receive it and go transport it. But if he had told him, Helech Kameshama, do as she said, I could tell you that actually he's relying on her words, and he wouldn't believe the Shliach, and he would depend on her. And if he'd want to back out, he would not be able to back out. He could actually boast them of making him a Shlich Lekabbalah. So therefore the Gemara is not really conclusively proving this question of Rav Nachman. We thought to say it's exactly the case of Rav Nachman. It's not, because Rav Nachman's case is different because he's saying, Helech Kamasha Amra, do as she said. Here he's not saying do as she said. Even though he's saying the same thing, similarly what she is saying, it's not really what he's doing. He's saying his kabel, which his kabel could mean his kabel v'hoilech. So therefore, the Gemara ultimately is just saying it's not the same case, and therefore we cannot prove from here regarding the teaching of Rav Nachman. Now the Gemara continues now on this theme that we mentioned in the previous daf from Samach Beis and Beis of hoilech kazachi dami. Whether when the husband says hoilech, does that mean I bedavka want you to bring it all the way to her, and lav kazachi, you cannot merit it for her? Or no, could hoilech mean kazachi dami? So tell me, I learned the brayso. Hiskabeli giti. If the woman says to her shliach, here, receive from me my get, and he comes to the husband and he says, Ve'ishtacha amra hiskabeli giti. So exactly what she said. Your wife said, receive from me my get. And the husband says, hoilech v'ten. He says, take it and give it to her. Or zachila, merit for her. Or v'skabela, or receive it for her. The halacha says the Tanakama rotz alach zalayas. If he wants to back out, he cannot back out. Well, the word zachila for sure and his kabbalah for sure is that okay, receive it for her. And even hoilech, says Rashi, he holds hoilech is gezachidami. So if she made your shlich kabbalah, which she wants you to get the divorce right away, so then hoilech is acquiescing to that too. So he can't back out. Obviously, she divorced the moment the shlich gets it. Ibn Nassim, he says no. He disagrees on one of the cases. He says, Hoilech v'tenla, regarding if he says, take it and give it to her, Ratzalach Zayachsa. If he wants to back out, he could back out, because he holds it's lav kazachadami. But whereas if Zachila or Biskabila, those are terms of meriting for her, then Ratzalach Zayachsa cannot back out anymore, because she made him a shlich l'gabal, and she divorced the moment the shlich gets it. A third Tana, Rabbi, he says, B'kulan, regarding all the cases in Ratzalach Zayachsa, if you want to back out, you cannot back out. Aval im amalai. But if, let's say, he tells him, no, I don't want you to receive it for us. So he's explicitly revealing his intention that when he's saying hoilech is lav gezachi, ella, rather hoilech v'tenla, I want you to go bring it and give it to her. Then then if he wants to back it, he can back out. Which is right behind the Tanakama. Similarly, the same thing of the Tanakama, which Tanakama also said that the halacha is hoilech is kezachi dami, and therefore he cannot back out. Says the Gemara two pshatim. If you want, you could say ef shas. The Rebbe is just coming to teach you another added on chiddush that if he says I don't want, and then he says hoilech, then he could back out. If you want, you could say hakamash malan. It's just coming to teach us man Tanakama Rebbe. You're right. It's the same opinion. It's just saying who is the Tanakama? It's Rebbe. As we know, he said this same halacha. Now, you learn the following question: Heilech leReb Nasan. We just quoted three Tanoim. Really, the first and the last one were the same one. The middle one, Reb Nasan, disagreed with the other two Tanaim. He held hoilech is lav kazachidami. So if the woman makes a shlich and the shlich l'gabala, and the husband says hoilech, he's saying you are not a shlich l'gabala. I don't want you to be zayich. It's only going to be divorced when you're hoilech, when you bring it all the way to her. The question is heilech, as we said already in the previous daf. Heilech is different than hoilech. Hoilech means go and hoilacha, bring it. Heilach is really the compound word of heilach. Here, this is for you. Question is, according to Reb Nasan, is that kazachidami? Is that saying, okay, this is like you could merit it for her? I love kazachidami, or would it be that you cannot be zayich for her and heilech is here, take it and bring it to her? So the Gemara says, Tashmas being a raya from our Mishnah. Why? Our Mishnah says, if the husband says, he received this get to my wife, bring this get to my wife, because again, these are if he wants to get back out until the woman gets it. Then the Mishnah continued and said, if the woman says, receive from me my get, in other words, as Rashi explains, that if the woman had originally told to this shliach his kabel, and then the husband gives it to him with one of these two terminologies that the Mishnah started off with his kabel or heilich, the Mishnah then says, if the husband wants to back out, he cannot back out. So we continue to days. Says the Gemara, my love isn't the case in the Mishnah. Behelich is talking about where the husband said, heilich, not heilich, heilich. And Reb Nosson that disagrees by heilich, but he agrees by heilich, that then if the husband wants to back out, he cannot back out because he said either hiskabel, which is for sure agreeing with the shlich l'kabbalah that the woman made, or even heilich is also he's agreeing that it's kizachidami. So you see l'chayr raya that Reb Nosson would agree. Says no, it's b'heilich v'Rebbe. It doesn't even have to be heilich. Give me heilich. And Rebbe holds even heilich is kizachidami, and don't amend heilich to heilich. It's heilich and hiskabel. Those are two cases. If the woman makes him a shlich l'kabbalah, that he's going to be heilich kazachidami, he can be merited, which of course she wants him to merit it because she said, I want you to be a shlich kabbalah, and therefore he cannot back out. The Gemara says, okay, Tashma to bring a raya from the next words in the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Lafigach, therefore, Imam Alay Habal, if the husband says to meaning, what's the therefore? As we explain the Mishnah, what it's essentially trying to say is that the husband really can't back out. If he wants to be able to back out, what he has to be able to do is like this. Imam Alay Habal, the husband says to the shlich, no, I don't want you to be a shlich kabbalah. Rather, I want you to go take it and give it to her. Then Ratzal Achzi asks if he wants to back out, he can back out. Okay, wait a second. Time of the Amay Yevsh, it's only because he says, I don't want you to be. Had he not said, I don't want, then the halacha would have been, Ratzal Achzi Yachse. If he wants to back out, he cannot back out. Oh, my love isn't a Behelich Reb Nosson, which again is really the same thing as the Gemara before, that it's Reb Nosson, and because the husband is saying Heilich, and if he doesn't say Yevsh, he cannot back out. So you see that Reb Nosson holds Heilich is Kazach. He says, no, Behelich Rabbi, it's Heilich, and it's like Rabbi, who holds Heilich is Kazachi, and therefore if he doesn't say Yevshi, that I don't want you to be shlich kabbalah, he will be shlich kabbalah. Someone says, okay, Tashma to bring a raya from a brisa. Brisa says, Heilich gets el ishti. The husband says to the shliach, here, bring this get to my wife. The halacha is rotzalach ziyas. Of course, the regular shliach halacha, if he wants to back out, he can back out. Let's say he says, Heilich gets el ishti. Not Heilich, but Heilich. Then, rotzalach ziyas. If he wants to back out, he cannot back out. Ooh, man sham le dama b'Heilich. Who is the Tana that says b'Heilich? Ratzalach ziyach, if he wants to back out, he can back out, because Heilich is lav kazachi dami, that's Reb Nosson. And yet we're come by Heilich. What do we see in the Sefer by Heilich? Ratzalach ziyach. If he wants to back out, he cannot back out. Okay, great. Shema minah, Heilich kazachi dami, Shema minah. Obviously proved that according to Reb Nosson, who's the Tana, as we see that Heilich is lav kazachi dami, Heilich is kazachi dami, and you cannot back out. That answers that question. Now the Gemara goes back to what we said regarding if Heilich is kazachi dami or not. Itma that we learned the following halacha. His kabali giti. If let's say the woman says to the shliach, here, I want you to accept this get for me. And then the shliach says to the husband, V'ishtacha amr hiskabali giti. And he says, your wife said, accept for me my get. And he says, Hoilich v'tenlo. He doesn't say, okay, look, do what she said. He says, take it and give it to her. So Amar Rabba, Amar Rav, Huna, Amar Rav. He says, the halacha is that nasa shluchai v'shlucha. So essentially what happens is that it becomes his shliach and her shliach. That is, and therefore, if the husband dies before the get comes to her hand, the halacha is going to be v'chayletzes. She's going to have chalitza and not yibum. Why? So the Gemara says right away. Remember, is that to say the mesafkele l'Rav, that Rav wasn't sure. Do we say that hoilich is kezachi and therefore she was divorced the moment the shliach got it? When he said hoilich, he was saying, no, I don't want you to be zaych in it. And therefore, we don't know. So therefore, now when he dies, okay, you can do chalitza. You can't do yibum, and you can't just let her go. We don't really know if she was divorced or not. Because when he gave the shliach the get, and then he died before the woman got it, we don't know what he means by hoilach kazachidam. Is that really why Rav says chaletz v'mesebem because he wasn't sure? But we learned the following teaching. Let's say someone says, here, take this 100 dinar and give it to that person that I owe him this money. Amar Rav, the same Rav, says, chayev, the sender is liable for insurance because the lender didn't tell him to send it. The borrower who owed the money was sending it. He's responsible. And but if he wants to back out, he cannot back out. Why can't he back out? Because when he said hoilich to the shliach is kizachi dami. So wait a second. You see, Rav clearly held that you can't back out because kezaycha. So why is he being mesupik regarding this woman when he gave the get? Says the Gemara, it's different because hasam safik memain lekula. That's a doubt regarding monetary law, which we're going to go leniently, meaning to say, whoever wants to try to extract the funds from the other person, he has the lower hand. So therefore, we say that he cannot back out because it's already in the hand of the shliach, and you want to go and now extract it, that you have the lower hand. So that's why he can't back out. But hacha safik isura. Here it's regarding a doubt regarding prohibitory law, regarding a sister-in-law about doing yibum. L'chumah, we have to go stringently, and we're going to have to say chalitza. So yeah, it is a safik. Don't prove from that halacha. That's because safik man lekula. Here it's going to be safik isura l'chumah. Now the Gemara continues regarding the shliach l'kabbalah, another teaching from Amar Rav. So he has an interesting halacha that he introduces. He says, Amar Rav, ein isha shlich l'kabbalah gita. The woman cannot make a shlich to receive her get miyat shlich bala, from her husband's shliach. So though we know there's a shlich l'kabbalah, that could only be from the husband himself. But she cannot send her agent to receive from the husband's agent. That's how Rav holds. Rabbi Shloimy disagrees. Says no. A woman could make a shliach to accept a get from her husband's shlich. Now the Gemara says, "My time the Rav. What is the reason of Rav that he would say it's a problem? What would be the problem with that?" So the Gemara has two reasons. By saying if you want to get same mishum bezoyin the baal because there's a disgrace of the husband, because like Rashi explains, he thinks that I must be light in her eyes that it's beneath her to receive the get from my shliach. And therefore, he's oiker the shliach of his own shliach, because if she makes a shliach l'kabel from her husband directly, so there's no concern of disgrace because he knows and he's giving it anyway. But when he makes his shliach and then she makes a shliach to receive from a shliach, like, it's beneath her to come receive the get. Therefore, it's not a valid. He's like uproots his shlichus that he made his shliach, and therefore it's not going to be valid. Or another approach is very interesting. Methodological type of like alumnus, a type of an explanation. What happens is, if let's say, after the husband gave the get into someone else's courtyard, she now acquires that courtyard. So like actually the discussion we had in the beginning of the daf, so that wouldn't be a valid get. Why? Because you need to have a nasan biyada. It has to be put into our hand or in our courtyard, which is included in yada, it's an expansive hand. Here, the moment he put it into the field, it wasn't her courtyard. And if she subsequently acquires it, that's not going to be valid. So we would geyser that the woman should not be able to make a shliach l'kabbalah to receive from the shliach lo'elacha because it's very similar. Because what happens is that the husband first put it into the hand of a shliach, and then subsequently she makes a shliach to be mekabel from that shliach. So people are going to come to say, chatzar is the same thing. It's the husband's shliach. When she acquired that courtyard, it became her shliach. So it's similar in that way that people are going to make a mistake to say that then the case of chatzar ba'al achmekan should work also. Because he put into his courtyard, and then somebody she acquired it, now became her shliach. It sounds similar to the case of he making a shliach la'halacha and she making a shliach l'kabbalah, which is really not the same, but it can be confused, and therefore that's a second interpretation of why Rav said she cannot make a shliach l'kabbalah to receive from his shliach la'halacha. Says Gemara, my banai, what's the difference between these two different interpretations of the two versions of why Rav made it forbidden? Says the Gemara, the difference between them is the kadma ihi v'shavya shliach. If she first made the shliach la'halacha, her shliach l'kabbalah me'ikara, before the husband gave it to his shliach la'halacha. Now, that's not similar to the case of chatzar ba'al achmekan, because that here it was first her shliach and then his shliach. Not the case of like when he puts in his chatzar and then she gets it. But it'd still be bezoin the baal. She's like, beneath her to come and get it. So therefore, that would be the difference between those two different pshatim if Rav would say that it's not going to be valid in that case. Now, a related discussion the Gemara brings, who gavra, the shadul agitul the base. There was a certain man who sent the get to his wife. Also shlicha, the shlich went, and ashkecha kiyasav kalisha. He found the woman, she's busy, and she's making dough. Amalah. So he said to her, hey, lechkita, here's your get. She said to him, let it be in your hand. You be my shlich l'kabbalah, meaning like she's like, team etayva, you be the shlich l'kabbalah. I'm busy. I'm making dough over here. So Rav Nachman says as follows: remember, we just had a machlekes Rav and Reb Chanina regarding if you can make a shlich l'kabbalah from a shlich l'halacha. He says, if I would know that halacha is like Reb Chanina who disagrees with Rav and holds that you could make a shlich l'kabbalah to receive from shlich l'halacha, then Avdiba, I would do something over here, Uvda, a story, like him, and I would say that she's divorced. And that is not like Rav. We're not concerned for Chatzar that it's considered like, oh, you can't make a shlich like Bav Shlich Lacha. You could. So here, the shlich le'lacha, she can make a shlich haba and receive it from his right hand to his left hand. And I would say she's divorced. However, Amalei Rabbi says, no, Rav Nachman, you can't say this. Even if you would say that this is compared to Reb Chanina's halacha, you're saying of this ba'ubda, you would do a story based on this. It's not true. It would be flawed for a different reason. The halacha is that a shliach has to be able to go back and tell the one who sent him, I did your shlichus. Now, that happens, he gets uprooted from his first shlichus, and here in this case, he doesn't have an opportunity to say, I did your shlichus, because right away that second, he goes and becomes a shlich l'Kabbalah. So he's not able to go back and tell the husband, I did your shlichus. So if that's the case, he's not a shlich at all. So that would be flawed in and of itself. So you can't say that here would be like a case of a shlich l'Kabbalah. It wouldn't work even according to B'chanina. So Shalchu l'kamid Rabami, they sent the question from Rabami, and Shalchu, he sent to them, Lo yichaz shlichus eitz labal. You're right. Here it wouldn't work. Because you can't, the shlich lahaloch has to be able to go back and tell the husband, I did, and therefore wouldn't work even according to B'chanina. Rabbi Chibar Abba Amar, he says, Nisyash b'dava. He says, we still have to look into this until we're able to figure out and settle our thoughts to figure out what's the halacha. In the case of Heilich. In the case of Heilich, if it's Kazachi Dami or not, right? Right.
Same case as because he became her and his shiur, that he can't go back to the husband.
I hear what you're saying. You want to know if when he makes him a certain shliach and she makes him, is that considered the same thing, the same problem?
Why does he have to say that? It's a separate case because we're not sure.
I think the reason is because in that case, it's either one or the other. If you say Hailach is Kazachi, essentially, I think it's a good question. But I think the answer is that if Hailach Kazachi, then essentially they're both agreeing that he's a Shlich Kabbalah. And if you hold Hailach Alav Kazachi, then everyone agrees he's only a Shlich Le'alacha. That's why I think that's why it's going to be different. It's not going to be a problem with it's not going to be both, one or the other. It's going to be one or not both. If you say Hailach Kazachi, which words there were? Nasa shluchay b'shluch. Oh, he's in the words. That's aha. I hear. Okay, so it's a valid question about how could it be both of their shlichas? Don't you have to be able to be? Unless you're saying that when it's simultaneous, maybe then you don't have the same flaw of finishing. Maybe here. Yeah, it's a good question. How would you be able to say what is the understanding of that the shlichas has to be chayzer etzel abal? So Rabbi says in the Sashra, says we have to think about this question about what was brought up. So maybe he was thinking about this question. So they sent again a few days later to say, okay, what did you come out with? Amay says, Kalhani, all these times, they keep on sending me messages. Just like you're not sure about this, we're also not sure. Give me time. I don't know. I don't have the answer. The Gemara does come out. It is this question that came up in the Beis Medrash is a question regarding something of a rayas. The halach is when it comes to a rayas, you can say chalitza and not have yibum, like meaning not like Rabami who held that you'd be able to do yibum if he dies. We're not sure. We're not sure what the halach is going to be in this type of a case, as we had asked the question regarding this halacha that was brought up, where Rabami said yes, so then, yeah, it's you could do yibum. She was never divorced. He says, no, not so partial. I don't know. The Gemara says, there was such a story that happened. You required another get because, again, there was a chazal sheikhlet sabal, so she wasn't divorced at all. And the Gemara says, wait a second, Tarti, both? If there's a get, she's already divorced, so why would you need chalitza when he dies? The Gemara says, no, get michayim. If she's coming to get remarried when he's still alive, she would need a second get. If he dies and he didn't give her a get, then like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, then you would require chalitza because of this suffix that they weren't sure exactly would it be a problem of or maybe it wouldn't be, and therefore there was not resolved because the Davar Shabbat ever we're going to go l'chumra. Also regarding agency, regarding shlichus, the Gemara says Ahida b'kochla nafasa. There was a woman, her name was Nafasa. Azal Sahadi. So then the witnesses went along, who the husband had told them, here, write a get for my wife and give it to her, and they were kasav tafasa. They made a mistake. Instead of writing nafasa, they wrote tafasa. So Amr B'Yitzchak B'Shmuel B'Marta Mishmei Rabbi says, also Eidim Shluchusan. Very interesting halacha. What does this mean that the witnesses did their agency? That they were given permission to be witnesses and write one get. They already wrote one get. They weren't agents to go and write another get. That's kosher. So they're done. They can't write another get. It's over. Rabbi says, come on, really? Mikamalu, did he tell them write an earthenware shard and give it to the heart? In other words, that's not considered that they did it once already. They didn't do anything. They wrote the wrong name. So Elam Rabbi disagrees. He says like this: Zada ikasav sahadi gitim al yava of it. Had they written a good get and then they lost it before they gave it to her, then I would say also Edom Shluchusim. Then they did their agency. They did not let her write a second get and give it to her because they already wrote a get kasher. They were only authorized to write one get. But even on that, Maskevla Rav Nachman doesn't like that either. He says, Bikamlu, did he tell them kisva and chubek kisaychu? Write the get and put in your pockets? What do you mean? That was also part of the agency. They didn't do anything either. It was to give it to her. So Elam Rav Nachman says, he says, no, you can even write it and give it even 100 times. Now, related to this, the Gemara brings Boimanei Rav Nachman, who we just quoted him. Kisvu v'tenu l'shliach. What happens if he says, write it and give it to my agent that I appointed, and they did this, but it got lost on the road? What's halacha? Would we say saluki salakluhu? Okay, they did their whole agency, they're out of the picture already, they can't do it again. Maybe no, here also it's until it gets to her hand again and she gets divorced. That's what they made them shlichus to write. It's just that she was just concerned he didn't want them to have to go through the effort of bringing it. But it's not that they're done. It's only done when it gets to her. He said, you're done when you give it to the shliach. No, that was just to make it easier for them. So Ravina Rav Ashi, he says that if you're going to say that in such a case, that he didn't tell them but to write it and to give it to the shliach, and they wrote it and they gave it and it got lost. But they did their agency already because whatever they were commanded, they did and they're out of the picture. But the question would be, what happens if a yoylech lamahu? In other words, would we say that since he said, write it and give it to the shlich and and then bring it to her, then he made them the shluchim to go ahead and write it again until it gets to her hand? And that's why he went so far to say, and he will bring it to her? Why did he say v'yalech and he'll bring it to her? Because he was trying to specify, and I want to make sure it gets to her? Or maybe it wouldn't make a difference. Says the Gemara, take a let it stand. One last piece, says the Gemara from the Mishnah of Shem Lul, he had said, that even if she says, go ahead and bring for me my get, if it wants to back out, it cannot back out. Because that's also a terminology of Kabbalah. Terminology in the Braisa, Tuli, she says, take from me, Vesali, lift it for me, or Viheli Biatre should be for me in your hand. If the woman tells this to the Shliach, and one of the terminologies, Kul Lash Kabbalah, and they're all terminologies of receiving, and therefore the husband would not be able to back out after such a reception. Thank you to any time for hosting us.